Hello everyone! So after the two new broken characters from last week, we have another new character this week named Makata. She's pretty cute and she's also just as busted. So yeah, there's not really too much to cover except for her, so let's go over her real quick. I do have some thoughts on her and the state of the game that I'm going to go over after I talk about the character a bit, but yeah, let's just go look at her real quick. She is a stab breaker, and she's really good. Let's look at the memoria first. It is a breaker stat spread, a breaker memoria. However, it's not for stun damage. It's actually when attacking a stab weakness, give the enemy 27% received damage for 2 turns. So this is a pretty good memoria overall. 27% is a pretty high value. However, because it is generic received damage, it's not particularly scalable, right? You can't scale it with traits or anything like that. So it's not like completely broken. And it does have a pretty strict condition of requiring that you attack a stab weakness. Now, if you're using Makta to apply this, who gives, stab resistance down before attacking, like that's not really too difficult to get. So it is a pretty good memoria, but it's hard to say whether or not it's going to be a meta memoria because you're still going to need to, get all the ranks, and it's pretty hard, but it is definitely a very solid memoria. So one to keep an eye on for sure. And then we have Makta herself, and she is a stab breaker, and she has a pretty interesting passive. This is going to be the main, really strong part of her kit. There's other things about her kit that are very good as well, but the main appeal to her is at the start of the battle, she gives herself 15% speed, so this makes her very, very fast at the start of the fight for the first turn. It gets her speed somewhere above 300% usually, and then she also gives herself a guaranteed force break for her first attack. And this is the first time we've had force break outside of a burst. And not only is it outside of a burst, it's something you can very easily trigger immediately, right? That's kind of the intent. She'll automatically break any enemy that she hits with her first attack. Now, her skill 1 and her skill 2, in fact, all of her skills are single target, so she's not going to be force breaking the entire field, but she'll be able to force break a single enemy immediately, which is pretty good. Very, very useful, especially for things like the new Tower Floor 44, which has an enemy with 6,000 stun gauge. So yeah, very strong character. Kind of, solving the issues of breakers not being able to break things through brute force, which I don't necessarily agree with from a balance standpoint, but it is very strong. Then her other passive is also kind of interesting. When breaking a target, she gives herself 100% skill damage for 2 turns. This is a pretty crazy self-skill damage buff, and she does have relevant... on top of her being very, very fast, she also has relevant values for, damage rate on her skill 2 and her burst skill, so I can see a setup where, you just break with her skill 1 and then use her as your attacker. It's probably pretty doable. It's still going to be kind of a meme gimmick, but you put a ton of buff B on her and your supporters, and I could see a setup where she actually does pretty decent as a damage dealer as well. So it's kind of interesting. She's kind of the first hybrid breaker attacker setup they've done where I'm like, okay, yeah, this can actually work, but that's really mostly because she's completely broken in every way and not because the setup is actually worth doing, right? And then she also gives a buff to all allies after breaking something for for plus 20 skill 2 penetration. Permanently, it caps out at 100. This is kind of whatever. Plus 20 penetration's going to not be that effective at really anything. But it is a bonus. It will stack up in a tournament setup and be an extra buff. However, because it only applies to skill 2, it's probably not going to be that strong for tournament. The only character that can really get away with using skill 2 in tournament is going to be Awakened Resna, and you probably won't put Makta into an Awakened Resna team, so this part of her passive is kind of whatever. But yeah, it's not bad. It's still fairly high powered overall. And free damage is free damage, right? So it is free damage. She will break something and she will give a penetration buff, so that's cool. But yeah, what does the rest of her kit do? So first up, we're going to look at her skill 1. It's a pretty decent buff where she gives all allies 10% physical attack for 2 turns, and then she will also give herself a break enhance panel on her next turn. Kind of whatever, honestly. It's a good skill 1 for sure. Physical attack for 2 turns, 10%. It's a solid buff. It's going to be like about equivalent to, like, let's say Ompel's skill 2, probably a little bit worse, but it's like in that range. Like, it's a very strong skill 1, so pretty good. But it's not really like good for a breaker. It's a good like supporter skill 1. And then for her skill 2, when attacking a weakness, it has plus 50% break damage, which is a lot. Before attacking, minus 25% stab resist for 2 turns. This is pretty standard for breakers nowadays. She creates her own weakness. Then after attacking, give the ally with the highest physical attack 30% stab damage for 2 turns. And then also when breaking a target, delay the target by 2 turns. So yeah, there's a lot here. She has a really strong delay effect, which is always going to trigger on the first time you use the skill. If you use this on her first turn, like, she will get the delay from her passive when breaking things. Like, that's pretty crazy. Her giving a very large skill damage buff to an ally for 2 turns is quite crazy. Now, it only applies to stab characters, so it can either be to herself, which just furthers using her as like a hybrid breaker attacker, or to like Mike or something, and she'll be really strong. This is stronger than, like, for example, Liddy's damage buff, right, who is the standard for a long time. And of course, stab resistance and extra break damage. But I haven't even gone over the craziest part of the skill, and that is the 325% break rate. And I know many of you probably don't really pay attention too much to the break rates on most characters, but 325% for a skill 2 is basically it's not power creep, it's more like a power avalanche. This is just a straight jump to double the normal break rate values, right? So most characters for single target stun on their skill 2 have around like 160 to 180%, so this is effectively doubling that. In fact, the most recent breaker on their burst had a rate of 375. So this skill 2 has a break rate of near burst levels for any previous breaker. So like Academy Ryza, the latest Ryza, any other single target breaker like Awakened Valeria, they all have 375% on their bursts, and this skill 2 is 325%. So it's double any previous skill 2. It's almost as much as a burst. It's just absolutely crazy. Then on top of that, it has 50% break damage, and it creates weakness. So this skill 2 is honestly better at breaking than most bursts that we have had up to this point. So absolutely wild. Yeah, very, very strong. And her burst, of course, goes to 625%. So in most situations, it also has the same weakness generation and 50% break damage. So in most cases, this is effectively going to be force break. Like, it does that much stun damage. It's going to effectively be a force break in most situations. So very, very strong. On top of that, it has 525% damage rate, so it is good at dealing damage as well. And then it has a bunch of other effects here too. It'll give the ally with the highest physical attack on your team 35% physical attack. When you break, it'll give all allies 30% skill damage for 1 turn. And then it's also going to give enemies a debuff when it breaks. I don't remember what it's called. And this debuff will cause the enemy to skip their next turn. So not only are you probably going to stun the enemy, delaying their turn, that turn is also going to get skipped because of this debuff. And because it's a debuff and not a status ailment, the enemies will not have resistance to it. So it's guaranteed to apply. It's quite strong. So yeah, as you can see, she's a pretty crazy high-powered character. She kind of solves a lot of the breaker problems that we've had for the past 8 months by herself, just through brute force and power creep. So She is quite good. And her leader skill isn't really anything. It's like 10% phys attack and some skill break damage for the adventurer group. It's a good leader skill, but it's not amazing. And her gift is weakness break, so this is a very good gift. It's 25% stun damage instead of 20% if you're actually building her with a break damage trait, so pretty solid. But yeah, I have some thoughts on this character. She's obviously incredibly powerful. Going to double the break damage all at once, obviously that is a way to, you know, bring breakers up to the power level that they need to be to actually stun things in the current meta, but that's not really what I want to see, because what this ends up doing, right, like, they can solve the breaker problem just by tuning enemy stun HP so that it's more reasonable. They can make it, you know, kind of difficult to stun things without really good gear, but they can make it more reasonable. Doing it this way, where they're just releasing new characters with much higher stun values to compensate for enemy stun HP being tuned to an unreasonable level, all that does is it makes every other breaker still completely worthless as breakers. So, like, it's not a great way of solving the problem, in my opinion, because it still doesn't solve the problem for every other breaker. It only solves the problem for Makta and future breakers. Basically, you know, incentivizing people to spend more money to have meta-relevant characters instead of other older characters being able to at least compete, even if they're a bit worse, right? So, in my opinion, it's a very short-sighted way of balancing and will lead to player fatigue and burnout if they keep going this way, where, you know, only the newest characters are viable and the older characters, you know, basically suck, right? It's kind of a really obnoxious way of doing things, in my opinion. And it's basically the same. It was the same problem with the previous banner as well, with Mike and Diona. Mike and Diona are also incredibly broken. If I had to say how good Mike is, I would say she's probably like at least 10 times better than Izana, if not more. Like, that is the level of power creep we're dealing with here. And Diona as a supporter does a lot, but she's a little bit hard to use. But she's still like very, very, very strong. I don't think Diona is quite as egregious as Mike is, or as Makta is, even though Diona is very, very good. We've had really, really good supporters for a while, and Diona's a little hard to use. Her really strong skills are a little bit conditional, so, but she is quite good. I did use her in the most recent tournament, and she's very, very strong, so. But yeah, doing it this way is, I don't know, I don't really like it. We'll see how this ends up going forward, but I'm not a huge fan of the way they're balancing right now. And I do understand from certain perspectives, like, obviously, they've been under like a pretty severe time crunch. The content that's been coming out recently has obviously been a little bit rushed. And definitely they did not sell very much in October. October revenue and player numbers were very, very, very bad. So I could see them scrambling to make character like really OP characters that people actually want to pull for because of that. And there's a number of reasons October was bad. I didn't make any videos during that month for JP. It was just kind of lackluster content, really bad characters, and very mediocre like outfits as well. No new characters, no alts that people were really excited for, so. And they effectively skipped Halloween. Like, it's kind of their own fault that October was bad, because they had a lot of hype from September with the first anniversary stuff, and they kind of dropped the ball going into October. I think a lot of that was probably time crunch, and then part of like the company restructuring. Maybe a lot of staff was like shifted. I'm not completely sure. It's all speculation, right? It's all speculation, but at the end of the day, it seems they're trying to make up for that right now with a bunch of new characters that are obscenely overpowered, and I don't think it's going to be good for the game in the long run that they're starting to balance this way, but we'll see. Then on the other hand, you know, we have the elephant in the room as well. We have the Awakened Resna problem. And I totally understand it's like super, super difficult for them to make compelling characters at a reasonable power level after Awakened Resna was introduced. And like, I totally get that. Awakened Resna, I'm pretty sure, was a complete mistake, like a complete oversight. Like, I'm sure they just wanted to make an exciting first anniversary character, and they just completely screwed up and released a character that was like way, way, way too strong without intending to. And so I understand that it's like in this era, with that character existing, they need to make really strong characters that can compete with her for them to be exciting. But it's just overall like the game's in a bad spot. That's all I want to say. Hopefully they can pull it back and make it really good going forward, but it's hard to tell. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. I'm not going to be quitting the game, but I am definitely worried about its future right now, so we'll see. And this time for Makta, we only have 3 recipes. I'll go over those real quick. They're not too exciting. We have the weapon for stab attackers. After attacking, lower stab resistance by 6% for 2 turns. I believe the Naginata, I believe that's what it was for like Valentine's Eska, is actually better, but I'm not completely sure on that. I don't remember exactly what it does. I guess we can go look. What chapter was that, like 12 or something? Or 11? Wait, where is it? That was an event recipe, was it? Or was it earlier? Oh, here it is. Chapter 9. Yeah, so this is for stab when breaking, 11% increased physical damage. I think this is often going to be better than the other weapon because she won't have any problem actually stunning things for once as a breaker, and she already lowers stab resistance, but she doesn't have any increased damage taken, so, and that can actually be scaled, although you probably won't use those traits on her. It depends. They're both good. They're both fine. Yeah, they're both fine. The armor itself is kind of interesting. So it's for stab characters. When breaking an enemy, give them a permanent minus 4% damage dealt. That's kind of interesting. It's a defensive item, but 4% is kind of low. It caps up at 12, but you have to stun them 3 times, and ideally by that point they're probably long dead. And generally with Makta, if you're stun locking an enemy, you probably don't care about the damage they deal anyways. So, you know, it's not really that exciting. I wouldn't really use this. I'd probably use the Valentine's dress for Asuka, because you are going to be stunning things, so that buff is going to be really, really good. And then we have the accessory, which is just for stab breakers. When attacking weakness, 17% break damage. The stab ring for tower is 18% break damage for a single target. So that's always going to be better on Makta than this. Unless like you really need a different speed tuning. This is 10% speed, that one's 12, so. But yeah, this is kind of like, this is pretty whatever in my opinion. There's better or equivalent. I don't think this is very strong, so. Yeah, the recipes are kind of whatever. Let's just go ahead and do our pulls. Hopefully I get her. That would be pretty cool. I'm just going to be doing my tickets. I don't really care too much about spending gems on her. She is quite strong, but personally, I'm not super in love with her design. And if they keep doing like really strong power creep characters like this going forward, like there'll be other characters that I like more that are going to have very similar kits, most likely. Maybe not, we'll see. It would be really weird for them though to release like all of these overpowered characters during November, then we get to December and they start releasing a bunch of bad characters again. Like, that would be a bit strange, right? So this will probably be the new normal power level going forward. I'm not too concerned about getting in on the first wave if I don't like the characters that much, so it's kind of whatever. This pull looks like a whole lot of nothing. Like, absolutely 0 in here. That is totally fine. We have one more set of tickets. And what do we got? No inks again. Alright. Probably a whole lot of nothing. That's fine. Oh! We do at least have... Oh! Val's being caught by Resna. Does that mean... Yeah, it's gonna upgrade to pickup. Alright. So we did get a pickup, hopefully. Oh god, is that double pickup? That's the first time I've seen like the purple upgrade. That's crazy. Alright, that's a really good pull then. I wonder if it's like double Makta or like Makta plus Memoria. I'm pretty sure that's double pickup, but I have like never seen this before. Yep, that sounds like her. That is definitely her. She's gonna break everything. Very cool. I did not look through her animation. Whoops. It would be funny if we got two of her. But it is the Memoria. Very nice. Very good pull. I'm actually getting quite lucky recently on both accounts. That's pretty cool. Alright. Yeah, very happy with that. I mean, I'll obviously take her. I'm not going to spend more gems for her, but I'll obviously take her, so. Very nice. You know what? While we're at it, let's just send 3,000 gems at Mike. Because why not? I do want Mike. I think Mike's pretty cute. And she's quite strong. But I am starting to run low on gems on JP, so... I do need to start saving them, especially with Christmas coming up. I absolutely love Christmas alts, so... Yeah, this looks like nothing. I should have, I got baited by the luck. But that's fine. We already got quite lucky. Oh, there is a Memoria in here. Not one I care about. This is one of the Valentine's Memorias, but it's quite not very good. But that's fine. Alright, very cool. Thank you all for watching. Quite happy with the pulls. And I will see you all next week for the next character. So, yeah, have a good one. And bye-bye.